my name is Carol Haislip, and I'm the director of the International School of Protocol. We are based just outside of Baltimore, Maryland. I teach around the country, primarily in the Mid-Atlantic region. I teach etiquette and protocol to everything from a 4-year-old to adults. I had a group of 4-year-olds last night, and trust me, I'm really glad to be here today, or about as bad 4-year-olds I've ever seen. So this is going to be a great group this morning, and you all, I know, will be great as well. We started our company about 18 years ago. My business partner was a college professor for almost 20 years. And we teach everything from social etiquette to dining skills to communication skills, so a little bit of everything. Before starting this company, I actually spent almost 20 years working for a company in the finance industry. That is something that probably is unheard of for you all these days, 20 years with one company. Most of you will have, last statistic I heard was something like 15 or 12 to 15 different careers in your lifetime. I was lucky enough to be with a large company where I had really 3 different careers within that one company, so I got to just keep adding on my vacation time. I ran a training program for a number of years. It was an 18-month-long training program. I went around to lots of colleges and interviewed. I hired lots of college students. It was for either people starting out in the workforce or people who were making career changes. It was an 18-month-long training program. Again, something you don't see a lot of companies doing. That training program went away. You had to, while you were in that training program, though, sell yourself to other areas of the company. So you were in a big fishbowl once you were in there. So I had a lot of time to kind of mold them and work with them and get them prepared with technical skills, social skills to go out there. After I ran the training program, I actually moved into a sales division. So I was calling on middle market size companies, CEOs, CFOs, owners of companies, so a variety, working with them. And then I moved into human resources where I was doing training development. But the one thing that I did the whole time I was with that company was I interviewed. I have interviewed hundreds of students. And I figured out after all those years that it was not necessarily the individuals who were the smartest, went to the best schools, or who were the highest class ranked, who were getting the jobs, keeping the jobs, and doing well in those jobs. It was the individuals with the strong social skills. It was the ones that could walk into a room, shake your hand, look you in the eye, carry on conversation, and we took everyone to lunch as part of the interview process. So dining skills became part of what we used to make that decision. Put that back in the back of your brain there. So those were the skills that made the difference for the individuals who were truly being successful. My business partner, who was a college professor, as I mentioned, she was finding that her best and brightest students weren't getting jobs. What was the disconnect? She saw the same thing I did, that these were the skills that truly made a difference. So we were actually introduced by a mutual friend, and the rest is history. So we teach everything from 4-year-olds through adults. We do a lot of college programs. I work with at-risk youth. We believe manners are the great equalizer. It doesn't matter where you come from, what your background is. If you have manners, you can go into any situation and know how to handle yourself. So on that note, I'm going to ask you a question. How long do you have to make a first impression?
30 seconds.
Okay, 30 seconds. Anybody else? Anything else? 10 seconds. 10 seconds, okay. That's listening early. How long do you make first impression? 5 to 6. They are listening. Okay, brownie points for you. All right. 5 to 6 seconds. That's all you have to make a first impression. In that amount of time, people are going to make assumptions about you. They're going to decide how smart you are, how wealthy you are, how successful you are, how educated you are in 5 to 6 seconds. Can you change the opinion that someone has of you? What do you think? Okay, no? No one no? Yes? Yes? Okay? Let me tell you a little story. Okay, I started this company 18 years ago. I was with the other company for almost 20 years ago. So a very long time ago, I interviewed for that job that I had. I can still tell you what the woman who interviewed me that day, when I went to interview for the company that I went to work for, I can still tell you what she was wearing and what she looked like the day she interviewed me. Why do you think that is? Was it because it was positive or was it because it was negative? What do we remember?
Negative.
I remember looking at this woman and thinking, this is the representative for this major corporation. I mean, I remember, I can tell you exactly what the suit she was wearing like. It wasn't particularly, didn't really look very good on her. There were sort of flakes on her shoulder and her hair was kind of dirty. But I will tell you, I got the job. She became a friend of mine. I worked very closely with her. She was with the company for more years than I was. But what I will also tell you is, what I noticed was, she didn't really move up in the corporation. She really didn't have more opportunities. For someone who had been with the company for as long as she was, she really didn't have other opportunities coming her way. So I would suggest that yes, you can change the opinion. I got to really like her. But you will never forget that first impression. If you create a negative first impression, how hard do you have to work to change the impression? Hard? Not very hard? Very. Very hard. I say like 200% you have to work to change the impression. So, that being said, when I would interview someone, I would probably decide in the first 30 seconds or so whether I was going to hire somebody or not hire somebody. Could I change my mind after an hour? Sure, I may decide, based on first impressions, I didn't think they would be a good fit, but I spoke to them for an hour, decided my initial impressions weren't correct, so I could change my mind. But that person had to work 200% to do that. So, what is it I would base my assumptions on? In those first 30 seconds of seeing someone, what am I using to decide whether or not I'm going to hire or not hire someone? What do you think I'm basing it on?
Their mannerisms,
Okay, can you be specific?
like handshake, the eye
Okay,
contact,
all right, body language.
smile.
Yep, okay, body language, all right? If I come in here and I say, I'm really happy to be here today. Do you believe me? No. So if my body and the words don't agree, which do you believe? Body or words? Body. Body's going to win out every single time. All right, so body language is really important. What else would I be basing my opinion on?
Attitude?
Attitude. How do you determine attitude?
Like the way they carry themselves.
Okay, body language.
Yeah.
Right? Back to body language. I agree. Attitude, you definitely can tell through the body language. Okay, what else?
Tone of voice.
Tone of voice, yeah. Or I'm shouting at you, or I have a very nasally pitch, right? You're going to have a totally different impression of me, okay? So tone of voice, I can write some of these down. So we've got tone of voice. Actually, what might even be better, because it looks like we got some markers. Is it okay if I just put this up? Maybe? We're not. Tone, voice, okay, body language. And I do have a handout for all of you. Just going to go over all this. Okay. What else? 30 seconds. What else am I basing it on? Appearance, specifically. How they dress. Do we judge people by how they dress? Yeah. Wouldn't it be a lovely world if we got to know what was inside of everybody before we made judgments about them? But the reality is we don't. So it's dress. There was a man named Albert Moravian who did some studies, communication studies, and what he found is at UCLA. What he found was that the initial communication, to that first impact when you greet somebody, dress and body language account for 55% of that initial communication. Tone of voice accounts for 38%. That leaves a measly 7% for the words you speak. So as I said earlier, you can be the smartest person in your class, but if the 93% is negative, then the chances that you're going to get that job are slim to nil. So the key is make that 93%, make these things positive, okay? So it's, the last part is words, you, see. So this is 55%. This is 38%, and that leaves 7 to those words. So let's start with body language. What do you think is the most important body language?
Posture.
Okay, posture, I think that's really important. You need to look like you have got a cord from your chest pulling you along. When you go to an interview, what are you selling?
Yourself.
Yourself, okay? You talked about attitude, confidence, okay? Confidence is an attitude. You need to have confidence in yourself, because if you don't have confidence, if they don't have the impression you have confidence when you go in for the interview, then they're not going to buy into the fact that you would be a good fit for their company, and you're the person that they should offer the position to. All right, so posture is important. What else? What are other body languages that are important? Which body language?
Smile.
Smiling. Thank you very much. You guys really were paying attention. Okay, smiling. Smiling is one of the very few universal body languages there is. It doesn't matter where in the world you go, it means the same thing. All right, confidence. You're happy to be there. All right, it's got to be a smile on your face is going to show that. For those of you that when you are in a position of being nervous, and everybody gets nervous before they go on an interview. I don't care how many interviews you've been on, everybody gets nervous before an interview. It's going to sound silly. Go home, stand in front of the mirror, put a smile on your face, see what it feels like, and then when you go in for the interview, make sure you got that same feeling in your face. You need to put a smile on your face when you go in for your interview. All right, so smiling and posture. What other body languages are really important when you go in for an interview?
Eye contact.
Eye contact. Eye contact is actually very cultural. In our culture, it is extremely important. Again, we said you're selling yourself. If you can't look the person in the eye, then they're not going to believe that you have confidence in yourself. And if you don't have confidence in yourself, they're not going to have confidence in you. I will let you know a secret. It doesn't have to be eye to eye. It can be eye to face. So you look right here between the eyebrows, it looks exactly like you're looking them in the eye. So if you find it uncomfortable to look somebody in the eye, try that instead. In other cultures, for example, in some of the Muslim cultures, Ethiopia, Nigeria, it's actually disrespectful for a younger person to look an older person in the eye. But in our culture, it's extremely important that you look somebody in the eye. Okay? Another body language that's really important on an interview.
Really strong handshake.
Ah, okay, that's what I was looking for. Do we judge people by their handshake?
Okay.
Oh, yes. You get one of these weak, limp, fishy handshakes, right? Does that person have any confidence? No, none whatsoever, all right? I remember somebody that I was dealing with by phone, right? You can get a picture in your mind of this person is like, and I was buying a product from this gentleman, and I remember meeting him for the first time, and from a distance, seeing him dressed in an impeccable suit, he looked great, and I get out, and he gives me this weak, limp, fishy handshake. It's like, I just had no more desire to have interaction with him. I mean, we really do judge people by their handshakes. Gentlemen, I have a question for you. I want just the gentleman to answer this question first. Gentlemen, you need to shake a lady's hand less firmly than you shake another man's hand.
Say no.
Okay, you say no. Okay. You all disagree? Agree? Well, you're being awfully quiet. As I said, I don't like lectures where I do all the talking.
I would want to say yeah, but
Okay.
not so much where it's,
Okay, so you think maybe you should make it a little bit more gentle?
yeah, I don't
Okay, okay, you want to switch for it? You agree? Okay, all right.
I side with him.
Okay, no? Okay. Ladies, do the gentlemen need to shake your hand any less firmly than they shake another man's? No. The answer is no. They can shake. You say, well, you don't want to do this, you're right. A lady's hand is oftentimes no less strong than a man's hand. Okay, I've got a really firm handshake. The handshake is not about crushing somebody's knuckles to bring tears to their eyes to show them how powerful you are. The strength of the handshake, okay, none of this weak limitation handshake. The strength of the handshake is all about showing respect, right? I respect you. I'm giving you a firm handshake. All right, so it needs to be firm. It's not crushing, but it needs to be firm. Same strength, ladies or gentlemen. What else goes into a good handshake? Okay, eye contact. You have to shake. You have to look the person in the eye, or close there too. What else?
Your smile, your position when
Thank you.
you're centered with them.
Okay, smile. So you need to be facing them. We tried to have, it was interesting, we did an exercise in the earlier program where people were having to have conversation. And I found a number of people were facing forward on the table and having conversations with the person sitting next to them. When you're interacting with someone, you face the person, right? It's kind of hard to do this and shake, all right? So you face the person, all right? So it needs to be firm, you need to smile, you need to look them in the eyes. What else?
Probably shouldn't do it for like 5 minutes.
Okay. Now that would be good. How long should you do it?
Depends.
I usually do it by number of pumps. How many pumps?
3 to 5.
Okay, 3. I usually say 2 to 3. 5 may be a little long. 1 might be Russian, but 5 is a little long. I'm not sure. That would be more like a Mediterranean. By the way, the handshake is the only appropriate form of touch in the business world. Okay? In our culture, touching someone on the shoulder, on the arm, you've invaded their private space.
No high fives.
But that's the hand. That's like a hand. Okay? So you're not touching them anywhere but the hand. In other countries, Mediterranean culture, South American culture, they're going to want to come up and give you a big hug, a kiss. They're going to want to touch your arms, and oftentimes a handshake in other countries may involve touching the arm, grabbing the arm as well as the hand. But in our country, only the handshake is the appropriate form of touch. Which hand do we shake with? Always?
I was wondering if you saw it when President Bush massaged Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany.
And when Michelle Obama touched Queen Elizabeth, too. There's been some interesting things like that. There was also an incident where Obama was meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan. In Japan, how do they greet each other for social, when they're in a social setting? The bow. You know how you show respect when you are bowing? Anybody know how you show more respect?
Did you look down?
Well, you look down, but there's a bow lower, exactly. Okay? The person who is showing respect to the other person, like if I was going to show more respect to you, I would bow very low, you would just bow a little bit. Well, when Obama was visiting with the Prime Minister, he actually did a very low bow. And there were a lot of people in this country that were sort of up in arms that, how dare you, the leader of the free world, how dare you show more respect to somebody. But in actuality, I think it was a very good thing. I think it was a way to create a relationship. I don't remember how we got down that way. Oh, which hand? Right hand, okay, always?
In America, yes.
Really? Sure.
I never shake it on
Have you ever had a broken hand or met anybody with a broken hand?
Then you just kind of shake their fast,
Suppose somebody doesn't have them. Suppose somebody doesn't have them. They have no hand. They have no arm. What do they have no arm? What do you think? They have no right arm.
If they stick out their hand, then I just stick out my hand, but I wouldn't stick out my hand first.
Actually, if you are interacting with someone who is missing a right arm, a hand, it's bandaged, it's in a cast, whatever, they can't use it, put your left hand out. But you're absolutely right. Other than that, it's always the right hand. It has nothing to do. Your hands are full, your right hands are full, you got to shift it. You've got to do the right hand. It's not dominant hand, it's always the right hand. So it's the right hand. We look them in the eye. We smile. It needs to be firm. 2 to 3 pumps. What else?
Introduce yourself.
So what would you say if you were shaking something?
I would say, hi, I'm Zach. Nice to meet you.
Perfect. Has anybody in here ever forgotten the name of somebody they met before? Has that ever happened to you? Okay, right? Okay. It happens to everybody. I don't care what the age. It's a really kind thing to do. When you are interacting with somebody, even if it's somebody you've met before, even if it's somebody you think, oh, this person should remember my name, okay? It happens to all of us. Simply introduce yourself. So, hi, I like it's nice to see you as opposed to it's nice to meet you. Why might I like that better? What does it's nice to meet you connotate?
You already like them?
You already,
Know them?
or that you've met them before, right? Or that, I'm sorry, it's nice to meet you means you haven't met them before, right? I had an incident in a school where I've done programs for many years, a couple hundred people, administrators, students. I went up to one of the women who was not wearing a name tag, and I said, hi, my name's Carol Haislip. It's nice to meet you. And she said, we met before. I met you last year when you were here. So it's like, so if I had simply said it's nice to see you, my name is Carol Haislip, then it would have been fine. But I learned that lesson the hard way. So always introduce yourself when you are greeting somebody. So that's the greeting. You need to be firm. You need to look them in the eyes. You need to have 2 to 3 pumps. You need to have a smile. There's one other thing that goes with a good handshake. And I will tell you that it is something that women did not used to do with the handshake. I don't know if I know you two know the history of the handshake now, but for those of you that don't know the history of the handshake, it goes back to a time when men carried weapons, and it was a way to show that you had no weapon in your hand, was to extend your weapon hand, which was your right hand, say, look, no weapons. The pumping comes from knocking out any weapons that might have been tucked up the sleeve. So women weren't carrying weapons, so women didn't shake hands. As it became a social greeting, women would shake hands as well as men. One of the things you may have also heard is that a man needs to wait for a lady to put her hand out first. Have you all ever heard that before? Is that an age thing? It goes back to that time when you didn't assume that a woman wanted to shake your hand. But as women have moved into and up in the corporate world, it's now appropriate for a man or a woman to put his hand out first. It doesn't matter. But there's one other thing I will give you a hint. I'm the only person in the room doing it. Standing. When you shake hands, unless both of you are seated, you must stand up when you shake hands. All right? So, when you are in an interview, when is it appropriate to shake hands? Okay, when you first meet them. Everybody you first meet, okay? And you do not need to wait. When you go in for the interview, you do not need to wait for them to come up to you and put their hand out. You go ahead and put your hand out. That shows confidence, okay? That shows a really great attitude. All right, when else is it appropriate? When you're leaving, okay? So coming and going, it is appropriate to shake somebody's hand. Again, it shows a level of confidence. Oh, I know, one other thing that I forgot. When you shake somebody's hand, the web of your hand needs to connect with the web of the other person's hand. None of this fingertip handshaking, please, all right? So it becomes a whole-handed handshake when you shake somebody's hand. So you are never wrong to put your hand out to shake somebody's hand, except when. When might it be inappropriate to shake somebody's hand? I'll give you a hint. It has to do with culture. In the Orthodox Jewish community and in the many Muslim communities, it is not appropriate for men and women who are not related to each other or married to touch. So if you were in a situation where you were interacting with someone from one of those cultures, then you would wait for the other person to initiate the handshake. It's relatively easy to tell, generally. In the Orthodox Jewish culture, a man's going to be wearing a yarmulke, a woman's going to be wearing a wig or a hat and be fully covered in clothing. In the Muslim community, the woman's going to be wearing a headscarf, and the man, you won't necessarily be able to tell. But again, if there's any question, wait for that person to put his or her hand out first. Other than that, you are never wrong to put your hand out for a handshake. Right? And it's an important thing to do when you go into an interview. All right. So we talked about body language, dress. How do you decide what's appropriate to wear when you go to an interview? I mean, there is no manual out there that somebody can hand you to say, here's how you should dress. We do lots of clothing programs at colleges, at businesses. People get out of college into the business world, and they have not a clue, because they came up with this term about 25 years ago or so called business casual, and it's done nothing but confuse everybody out in the workplace. So, back to you. How do you decide what you're going to wear? And I'll tell you what business casual is.
shouldn't you wear what the people who work there are wearing?
What the people that work there,
Yeah, like if you go to, like the accounting firm, everyone's wearing like a suit,
Okay.
and a tie, you should wear that. But
Alright.
like if you go to, like where I work, you wear like jeans and a polo, like if you dress like that, you want to apply there.
okay? I would suggest that you always want to take it up a notch if you can when you were going in for an interview. So obviously if they're wearing suits at work, then you can't take it up a notch. But if you're going to interview at a company where they wear polo shirts and khakis to work, I would take it up a notch and I would put at least a tie on when I would go in for that with a dress shirt. So again, take it up one notch, all right? Because you want to look, when you get there, you want to look like you've given some thought to the impression other people are going to have of you. When people look at you, what words do you want to come to their mind when they see you? What words would you like them to think?
Confident.
Okay, confident,
Professionalism.
professional,
A breath of fresh air.
okay, a breath of fresh air. Depending on the industry you're going into, like accounting, they may not care about a breath of fresh air, but there are a lot of them where, yes, that would be, what else? Smart,
Prepared.
prepared. For some of you that are on the younger side, maybe mature, right? So you don't look like the low person on the totem pole. So those are the words you want to come to their mind when they see you. And pay attention to details. You think about the industry you're going into and whether that's going to become an issue. And your dress is going to reflect those things. So looking how people at the company dress is really important. You need to think about the industry you are going into. If you are going into a more conservative industry, accounting, banking, finance, all right, then it is appropriate to be dressed in a conservative way. If you are going into an industry that is more along the lines of art, graphic arts, much more, advertising, those types of things, much more creative, then your dress can reflect more of that type of industry to a point. So as I said, it is not black and white. There's no piece of paper that anybody that can give you that says, here's how you should dress. What aspects of clothing reflect the words that we talked about? Professional, mature, smart. What aspects of what you are wearing would reflect those things? I'll give you an example. Oh, I'm sorry, Carol. The word right out of my mouth. I was going to say, if I showed up today wearing a fluorescent orange suit, would you have a completely different impression of me than if I show up wearing something in a professional color? Right? So color says a lot about whether you're smart, professional. I could remember all the other words that we came up with. But color's one of them. Okay, what else? What other aspects of your clothing might impact the impression somebody has of you?
Like cleanliness.
Okay, cleanliness. So attention to detail. Is it covered in spots? Is it neat? Is it frayed? Is it ironed? Those kinds of things. All right, you pay attention to details. What else? How it fits. Fit. We suggest to the ladies that there should never be a place in the workplace for what we call provocative clothing. All right? So that means that for a lady, the fit needs to be more conservative. I don't care what industry other than the nightclub industry that you might be going into. It needs to not be provocative. That means there is never a place for cleavage. That means your skirts are no more than 2 inches above the knee. That means things are not skin tight. Ladies and gentlemen, you want to be noticed for what you have going on from here up. From here down, you want to look like you belong. You want to look like somebody that could be part of that company, that could offer that company something. So from here down, it's just belonging. All right, so fit's important. For the men, there's all sorts of aspects of the fit of men's clothing. I can throw out some of the big ones for you, but when you put on a shirt with a jacket, your shirt comes down to the thumb joint, and then the jacket is actually 3/4 of an inch, half an inch shorter than the shirt sleeve, so your shirt sleeve will go beyond. You should be able to get 2 fingers into your shirt collar. Your pants should come to the heel in the back and should have a single break cut in the front. All right, your tie comes to your belt. So those are the basics of men's clothing. Men have it pretty easy. It's much more difficult for women out there. There are so many more choices for women. So fit and color are 2 important things. What else? What else goes into?
We talked about in class how like wearing a watch can make a big difference.
Okay. In what way?
Because it shows that like you care about time.
Okay. It's interesting. I did a program for a company a while ago, and it was individuals who were in their wealth management area, so dealing with very high wealth customers. And I had one gentleman who said he never ever wears a watch. And we got into the discussion because, as I mentioned earlier today, one of my pet peeves is people who put phones out on a desk or in their lap or somewhere where every time there's a text message and email, the light goes off and everybody, it looks like you're looking. And his comment was that was why he had his cell phone out, because he was looking at the time, and he absolutely refused to wear a watch. I would suggest that when you are going into a meeting with a client, the last thing you want, a client or a prospect, or for an interview, right? The last thing you want this person to think is that you are concerned with the fact that somebody may be sending you an email or a text message, and that you're going to keep watching it. So I suggest wearing a watch is a good thing, because then you're not using your phone as a timepiece. Rather, you have a timepiece on yours. Not that you want to be continually doing this all during the interview, but nevertheless, it's better than looking at your phone. So that's an interesting one. I haven't heard that, but I do agree. Okay, what else? What other aspects of your clothing will help somebody to come up with conclusions about you?
Well, like it's gotta be like clean and ironed.
Okay, great. So we need to focus on the detail. Those are really important. You may think that that little spot on your tie, gentlemen, is something nobody else will notice, but it may be the first thing that they notice when you walk in the door and think, oh, that person doesn't pay attention to details.
If you have tattoos, then maybe I'm not.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about tattoos and piercings. We still live in a world where tattoos and piercings, other than your single pairs of earrings in women, are accepted across the board. I think that probably is going to change at some point, but it hasn't changed yet. The issue that you still got is you've got a generation like me who grew up believing that, only unsavory people had tattoos. And so even though I work with lots of people that have tattoos, it's still always in the back of your mind. And so you may interview with somebody like me who thinks, I don't like that tattoo. I've only found one organization that permitted tattoos. Some of the more art-oriented industries will permit tattoos, but a lot of them will not. Same thing with piercing. So if you are going for an interview, I would suggest that you wear clothing which hides the tattoo. If you have more than one set of earrings in your ear, take them out except for one. Gentlemen, I suggest you take earrings out when you go for the interview. You may get in there and you see other gentlemen are wearing earrings, ladies have lots of piercings, and so it's okay. But you go in a conservative dress and then make a decision. Once you have the job, you would hate to lose a job opportunity because there was something about your appearance that turned them off. The other thing I will say is if you don't have a tattoo, think long and hard before you get one, because number one, as I said, it needs to be hidden. And you're actually not only making makeup, it's made just to hide tattoos. Whatever you pick now is not going to be the same thing you would pick 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road, and I promise you it won't look as good then as it might now. So think long and hard about it, because you will limit yourself. If you do have one or get one, put it in a place where it's easily hidden so that you're not perpetually putting Band-Aids on, putting makeup on, those kinds of things. So you need to really think long and hard about it. So tattoos are something, yes, that you need to avoid. All right, what other aspects of clothing would be important to think about?
Shoes, footwear.
Okay, footwear. Henry Ford used to say that he would not hire someone, gentlemen in particular, who came dressed impeccably in a suit, but whose shoes were not polished, because what that said to him is the person didn't pay attention to detail. So having polished shoes is extremely important. People will know. You may think they won't, and you may interview with somebody who doesn't care. But on the other hand, you may interview with somebody that says, that person might not have a spot on his tie, but he's got shoes that are unpolished. So that says he doesn't really pay attention to the details. So, ladies, for you, it is, has to be more of a heel height in addition to being polished. The interview process is not a place to wear 5 and 6 inch stiletto heels. All right, you need to look like you are there to work. You may be walking around a lot as you go through several different interviews. So you want to wear shoes that have a lower heel. You can wear flat shoes. They should have some heel. Ballet flats are not appropriate in a business environment at an interview. You need to have some structure to the shoe. Like I said, it's okay if it has small heel, but it needs to have some structure to the shoe. So no ballet flats and polished as well. All right, other aspects of clothing that might make a difference.
Jewelry.
Okay, jewelry. You don't want jewelry to be the first thing that is noticed about you. Jewelry is an accessory, so it shouldn't be the first thing. So ladies, if you're wearing earrings, make sure that they're not something that becomes distracting, whereas instead of looking at your face, the person is constantly looking at the earrings that are dangling in many colors or whatever. So think about that, what you're wearing on your wrist. We talked about a really good handshake. One of the things I forgot to mention is the fact that you don't want to have jewelry that's around your wrist that's going to get in the way when you go to shake hands. So make sure that you keep anything that would dangle around your wrist off of your wrist in the way of jewelry. And gentlemen, I suggest that the only jewelry you should be wearing when you go for an interview is a watch. All right, no other jewelry. I mean, if you wear something, some sort of a chain around your neck and you've got a shirt that's going to cover it, that's fine. But in general, just a watch. All right, other aspects of clothing. What about the style? Style matter?
Would hair matter?
Okay, all right. Let's talk about hairstyle. You know, it used to be that for men, the rule was no facial hair. That's absolutely not the rule anymore. But the facial hair you do have needs to be kept neat. All right. The main thing for your hair is that it is clean. It is colors found in nature. It is, if you color your hair, making sure you don't have roots. You need to make sure that if you have longer hair, that it is pulled back out of your face. The one thing you don't want to do, and as I said, anytime anybody goes in for an interview, they get nervous. And we tend to look for things to fiddle with. And if you've got long hair, it's way tempting to be picking it out of and twirling it and doing those kinds of things. So if you have longer hair, pull it back. I suggest that very long hair down your back is not as professional as shorter hair. So if you have very long hair, think about pulling it back, putting it up, doing something along those lines. It creates just a more professional hair. And I've styled clothes too. Again, we get back to the fact that if you are going into a conservative industry, then the style of your clothes is going to be conservative. If you're going into a more artsy industry, then it's appropriate to have them be more stylish.
Our men's suits used to be a lot bigger, and I remember I went to New York with my brother, and all the men were wearing really tight suits.
The European type suit, yes. And I had questions about that. It depends on body shape. The men used to have it so easy. There was just basically more or less one cut of suit, and they changed it a little bit. And as with most any clothing, body type makes a difference. So if you have a body type or wearing something that's you wouldn't want it to be too fitted, but being somewhat fitted is okay. You might be able to get away with it. But again, if it's more fashion forward to have the really fitted suits. If you are going into an industry that is very conservative, you may want to think about having something that's a little bit more conservative. I suggest for all of you that as you get to the point where you're going to be doing interviews, that you invest in a piece of, and this is another term that we didn't talk about that I think makes a difference, a very good piece of quality interview clothing. The quality makes a difference. People will notice. It's much better to have a few items of high quality than it is to have lots of items of poor quality. It is perfectly fine to wear the same suit to every interview you go on. They are not going to be talking among themselves about the fact that you see she wore that suit for the third time. It's perfectly fine to do that. So I would suggest that some guys can probably get away with the European cut, but that for the most part, I would not, if you have one suit, you're investing in one suit, I would not make it a European cut. I would wait till you have the job and then start to invest in things that are maybe a little bit more fashion forward.
I think it looks better though.
You think it looks better? It's a matter of personal taste. As I said, some people can carry it off and do really well, but not everybody can tell if they're one of those people that has really carried it off. So I would suggest again that you have just a regular fitted, I don't know whether it's called an American fit or not, but we know that was called European fit. Regular fitted suit is your primary investment, and then go ahead and invest in things that are maybe a little bit more stylish. The issue with that is that fashion comes and goes, not as nearly as much for men as it does for women. But it could be that a few years down the road you've invested in the suit and the very fitted European cut is no longer stylish and it's really going to date you. Whereas if you have just a basic, really well-made, American cut suit, it's never going to get dated. If you have a very conservative fabric, very conservative fabric. What's the best fabric for a suit, men's or women's? Wool. Believe it or not, they make wool for every season of the year. So in the summer, you would wear a wool suit, but it would be a very lightweight wool. The nice thing about wool is it looks high quality. It holds its crease. Dress slacks have a crease down the front. Okay, that's what qualifies for dress slack. And it cleans well. It doesn't stain easily. It doesn't kill. You can get some polyesters that are really good quality and look like wool, but they will in relatively short order start to kill. So that's what I said. You are much better off investing in a few pieces of high quality than you are in having lots of lesser quality items. And it doesn't mean you have to spend a whole lot of money. There are some great, I don't know here specifically, but I know in Maryland we have some great consignment shops where you can pick things up. Nordstrom Rack is another one where you can find things. I'm sorry? Something had another suggestion. Where is it?
There is a Nordstrom Rack.
Okay, Nordstrom Rack. I used to say Lowe's. But here's what I suggest, particularly for the men. The first suit you buy, go to a good men's store, whether it's a Joe Banks or although jury's still out on what their recent purchase or merger is going to do to them, but a Brooks Brothers, something like that. Invest in good suits, save up, invest in good suits. Go someplace where they can fit it, they can tell you what size you are, and they will know how to make it look good on you. And then you can go to a place like a Marshall's or a Nordstrom Rack or something like that because you know what you're looking for. As I said, it's really easy for the men, ladies. I mean, there's not a whole lot of choices. If you aren't good at matching colors, the general rule, men, is that your tie, when you start out, your tie should have the color of your shirt in it. That's a good rule to start out until you get good at matching colors and that sort of thing. Pocket squares are perfectly fine. You like a pocket square in your jacket pocket. But make it conservative. You are never wrong to be overdressed. You may be wrong to be underdressed. So keep that in mind. Okay, we talked about the general aspects of clothing. Let's talk about women's clothing a little bit. Yes?
I was going to ask a question about women.
Okay.
For interviewing, is a pantsuit equivalent to a skirt suit?
That's where I was going to start off. It used to be. Well, let me ask you this. Okay, let me go back to the men here for a second. For men, the only clothing that qualifies as business professional is a matching suit. That's it, period. For women, it used to be, when I started in the working world, it used to be that for a woman, the only professional dress was a skirted suit. That's changed. As you see women in high levels, I think of politics particularly, Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, who wear pantsuits for work, it is perfectly fine now for a woman to wear either a skirted suit or a pantsuit or a business dress with a jacket, but they need to be matching, not coordinated. anything other than those are what we call business casual. And a lot of people don't realize that. Business casual is simply one item different than business professional. Okay? It is not, in some companies, business casual may be a polo shirt and a pair of khakis. That is the lowest level of business casual. A company decides what the image is that it wants to have. Companies spend a whole lot of money, the website, promotional materials, making sure that people have a particular image of their company. When you go into work for a company, when you move into the working world, you are no longer just representing yourself, you're also representing the company for which you work. So you may like to get up in the morning and put on a pair of khakis and a shirt, but that may not be the image that the company for which you are working wants to have. And so you have to decide what that image is and how you are going to reflect that image. There are very few companies today for whom business professional is a 5-day-a-week job uniform. Most companies allow some form of business casual in addition to business professional. And a lot of times it will be up to you. So you are, we talked about going in for an interview. At any time when you're with a company, if you are going to interview or speak with a prospect or a client, that's an interview too. That's another kind of interview. You have to think about the impression they're going to have of you.
Talk about color a little bit. Is it black, blue, maybe blue, brown,
Sure.
gray? Is that a standard?
Yeah. It needs to be a conservative color. And the way to bring bright colors in is to wear, for the men, ties, pocket squares. For the ladies, it may be your blouse or your shirt. Silk scarves are another great way to bring color in. So it needs to be, again, that you look like you belong from here down. So again, if I was wearing fluorescent orange today, I wouldn't look like I belong. I look like I want to be noticed and to stand out. So you're going to wear darker and more conservative colors to look like you are, like you belong, and that you are, again, in a conservative field. If you are in an industry where you're going into graphic arts, some of the high-tech fields too, it's a little bit hard to figure out. It may vary a little bit. Are you all familiar with a website called Glassdoor? That's something that we've talked about at all of them. Glassdoor is a website where you can go on and you can look and see people who interviewed at particular companies will actually make notes about what they wore, what they saw other people wearing, what questions they were asked, any inside information that it would be helpful to you before you go in to interview. Not every company is going to be there, but it will give you an idea of sort of what to expect and sort of insider view of what goes on. And you go on, specific. Search for interview in the scroll down menu in the upper left box. So look for interview, and then it will give you ideas for questions and what to wear and that sort of thing. But again, that insider's view is helpful. Yes?
What was the website called?
Glassdoor. So, ladies, let's talk a little bit more about what's appropriate for you. We're talking about the fact that business professional is one of those three things for women. So when you're going for an interview, you are never going to be wrong to be wearing either a skirt suit, a pantsuit, or a business dress with a jacket. One of the reasons that I believe that business pantsuits have become so popular is because ladies are rebelling against the idea of having to wear hose. I don't know about you ladies, but I know for my 20-something-year-old daughters, they probably haven't had nude-colored hose on for the better part of a decade at least. And so I find that most women today aren't wearing them. I find even in very high professional level firms that women at the top are not wearing hose to work. That used to be unheard of. I still suggest, ladies, that if you are wearing a skirt or a dress, to go for an interview I would put hose on, okay? Because you don't know with whom you're going to be interviewing, but once you get in there, you can figure that out. But if you would rather not wear hose, then a pantsuit is perfectly fine. You need to make sure that, we talked about no provocative clothing, so ladies, gentlemen, whatever pants you're wearing, make sure that when you sit down, there is nothing, I guess this is more because the men are going to have their shirts tucked in, but ladies, there should be no skin showing, and I should have no idea what kind of underwear you're wearing when you sit down. So make sure that when you sit down, there's nothing that shows other than your shirt and your pants, your skirt from behind. You want to, the more skin you show, the less power people assume you have. So when you're going in for an interview, and again, for the men it's easy, but for the ladies, you want to make sure that you are not wearing sleeveless. There are some companies that won't even let you wear sleeveless to work. So you're not going to wear something sleeveless. I suggest even if you're wearing short sleeves that you have a jacket or sweater on, if it is a slightly less formal type environment. If it's more formal, then you're going to wear some sort of a jacket. So a coordinated pants, skirt with a jacket, that would actually be business casual, but it's a high level of business casual, and that could be appropriate depending on where you're going. What are you going to do before you go for the interview? How are you going to get an idea as to what's appropriate and what's not appropriate to wear? And how are you going to make that decision? As I said, there's no book out there that you give you, otherwise it would be really easy. Okay, you're going to go to their website. Yeah.
What their mission is, what kind of business they're in.
Exactly. You're going to go to their website. You're going to spend a lot of time on their website. Companies put a huge amount of time and money into their website. It's how they create their image. They want to hire people that spend time looking at their website. When I would do an interview, if I would have somebody who would say, when I would say, do you have any questions for me? If they would say, no, you can answer them all, it would be, not hiring that person. Because what that said to me was, this person's looking for a job, they're not looking for a career. I wanted somebody that was going to stay with the company. I wanted somebody that had taken the time to learn about the company. It's also a great way for you to get a feel for the company. So look at the company's website. What are people wearing? See if you can find people to talk to who might work there. What do people wear? Again, you want to look like you belong. Go to Glassdoor, see what it says. But I still suggest that you are never wrong to be more conservative than less conservative. So wear a suit when you go in. Be prepared. Unless it is a company where everybody is very casual. And again, some of the high-tech companies, I hear people going to interview in T-shirts and getting the job. T-shirts with words on them and getting the job. So you never know. But you'll know. Those are going to be more the outliers than the norm. So see if you can find somebody that's been on an interview. Questions about dress? Dress is really hard.
About makeup a little bit.
Okay, yeah, let's talk a little bit about grooming. So we talked about hairstyles, needs to be conservative, not too long. You don't want to have on a lot of cologne or aftershave. Literally, short of doing this, you should not be able to smell cologne or aftershave on you. There's nothing worse than shaking somebody's hand and then you come away smelling like whatever lotion or cologne or whatever aftershave that was on their hands. You want to make sure that your nails are clean and neat. Ladies, if you have polish on your nails, it must be impeccable. All right, I just talked to somebody who said they had a lovely woman come and interview for a job, and she said the first words out of somebody's mouth when she walked out of the room was, did you see how chipped her nail polish was? People will notice those kinds of things. So I typically wear clear or really pale nail color because if it does chip on your way in, then you're not going to have somebody wondering what in the world's going on with your nails. As far as makeup for women, I don't like to tell women you have to wear makeup, but I do suggest that makeup is polish. It's a little bit of polish, so it's sort of under eye cover and a little bit of mascara, but it's something that looks like you pay attention to detail, sort of like the polish on the shoes. It does make a little bit of a difference, so I would suggest that it should be part of what you do to make sure you're presenting a positive image. Same thing with hose. Hose is really nothing more than makeup for your legs. So I absolutely do not have perfect legs, flawless legs, and so hose for me just acts as a cover-up for all the flaws. So it's things like that that you need to think when you go into an interview, that you want them to be focused from here up, right? From here down, you want it to look like you belong. Other questions on dress?
Just have a comment.
Yes.
That the rebellious part of being the old hippie that's in here way back when, just really sort of ticks me off that you have to spend so much time on that when, you know, you're perfectly smart and capable and, you know, enthusiastic and all those things, but then there it is, it's that first impression. And it's so hard when you feel like you're being the best person you can be, but and you really do have to pay attention to those things.
Well, I'm going to toss that back to you and say, if you got a resume from somebody and it was filled with typos and grammatical errors, is that something you're going to interview? No, right. So it just depends on what it is. You know, we use different ways to judge people. I totally agree with you. This would be a wonderful world if we waited to know what was inside of everybody. We talked about that in the hour before. But the reality is it's not what we do. Particularly in this day and age where it's very competitive out there, you know, particularly for the really good jobs, the high-paying jobs, so you want to give yourself every possible opportunity you can. And it doesn't seem fair that dress is part of it. I talked about dining skills being part of what we use as well. You know, that's not to say if you pick up the wrong fork, you're not going to get the job. But if you're worried about which fork am I supposed to use, which is my glass, which is my bread and butter, like, it's really hard to sell yourself because that's what you're focused on. And so it's the polish that you, well, let me ask you a question. Would you ever go to a wedding wearing a dirty t-shirt and a pair of cut-off shorts? No, why? Disrespectful. Okay, it's disrespectful. The bride and groom put a lot of time and thought into planning their wedding, and you are showing them respect by helping to keep that image. Same thing for a company. A company is looking for prospective employees who will mirror the image they created. And in a very short period of time, relatively speaking, even if you have, you could have 20 hours of interviewing, in a relatively short period of time, they've got to make decisions about it. And so the reality is, the ways that they are going to do that is through your body language, through how you dress, through what your resume looks like, not just what's on it, but whether it is perfect grammar, perfect spelling, no typos, you know, those kinds of things. You may think, you know, oh, that's not fair because I could be a great employee, but those are the tools that they have at hand to, in a relatively short period of time, to make a decision about whether to hire you or not hire you. And so, like it or not, you have to apply.
Just like going back to makeup, how do you feel about like lipstick? Is that a different?
I think lipstick, well, part of it's age related. Especially as you age, you lose color in your lips. So I feel like I need to have lipstick. But I think that it's part of makeup. I don't think you have to. I don't want to tell anybody they have to wear any kind of makeup whatsoever. It's a personal choice. But it's just a little bit of polish and what you think makes you look more polished. So you may decide for you a little bit of under eye cover and mascara is all you need. Somebody else may think lipstick actually makes my face, it brightens my face, it makes me look better. So it's going to be very much of a personal choice as to whether you would wear it, but I absolutely don't think it's a given that you have to wear it at all.
Can it like hurt you?
Isn't it? I'm sorry?
Can it like hurt you?
No. No. Unless, I say that. I mean, if you were wearing hot pink, you know, lipstick that looked like you were ready to go out again to a nightclub, then yes, your makeup needs to be subtle. I didn't go the other direction. Let's go the other direction with makeup. You don't want your makeup to look like you're ready to go to a nightclub, okay? It needs to be subtle daytime. So I suggest if you are wearing eye makeup, it needs to be very subtle eye makeup. You're wearing lipstick, it needs to be a color that, blends well with your coloring, as opposed to something that jumps out. You want to be noticed for what you have going on up here. And so, it said there's no book that says yes, it's appropriate or no, it's not appropriate, which makes it really hard. I wish I had a book that I could give you that all you would do is pick it up and read it. But I would say you can do that. Yes,
I was just gonna make a comment, when you mentioned about when you look young, you want to look more mature. When I was first out of college, I looked really young. And so I consciously chose not to wear lipstick because I looked like a little girl putting it on. Whereas now, if I've grown into lipstick, So yeah, you can do the opposite. If you're young women, I mean,
yeah,
sometimes your fresh face look is more
yeah,
mature.
yeah, it's like the fresh air. And that's why I say I can't say, you have to wear it, you don't have to wear it, but for everybody, I would suggest it needs to be subtle. And I think that that's the key. And maybe your lipstick is clear lip gloss. I mean, maybe that's all you wear. You don't need any color across your face. It's just going to vary from person to person. I'm sure the guys are all really interested. Other questions? Gentlemen, you haven't asked me a single question yet. Ties need to be made of silk, okay? Like a polyester, a really good polyester, it doesn't knot very well, and it raises the collar of your shirt. You want to make sure that whatever knot you got, and I don't care which knot, there are a couple of different knots. If anybody is not sure how to put a tie on, shoot me an email, which is on the bottom of my contact information is on the bottom of the handout I'm going to give you, which is somewhere around here. I'm not sure where. Oh, here. Shoot me an email and I'll send you a website. I don't remember off the top of my head about how, or I'll shoot you a piece of paper we've got that pictures of how to tie a tie. No pre-tied ties, please. You can't leave them tied and hang them up. Okay, you've got to really tie it every time. But again, invest in some good quality silk ties. Needs to come to your belt. Your belt needs to match your shoes. And oh, by the way, gentlemen, this is one of my pet peeves. Your socks need to be the same color as your pants. And please, 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 they need to be long enough that if you cross your legs, there is no skin showing between the top of the sock and the bottom of the pants. Okay? There is nothing worse than seeing a man's hairy legs in the middle of an interview. All right? So make sure you're wearing tall socks. Right?
The only thing worse is seeing the color of the lady's
Yes, underwear. Yeah, I was riding down. I was in my car on the highway one day, and there was a lady on the back of a motorcycle who had this. And I'm thinking, is she real? She is flashing like hundreds of cars that are going by. All I could do was roll down my window. So.
Yeah, did you get a business card too
Yes.
as you drove by?
We did try that one time. We were in a restaurant. Somebody had, I don't remember what they were doing, but it was particularly egregious. And so we sort of knocked one of our cars on the floor for them to put them to go up and look at it. And said, they said, you drop this, and oh, by the way, here's my Mary Kay card. Take it like to buy them. So we didn't do that anymore. Other questions about dress? As I said, it's a really tough topic, unfortunately. There's a lot of it left to you. You have to make the decision, the image you want people to have of you, and then you have to decide. There are some books out there that you can find. There's one that I like called Casual Power that goes through the 5 different levels of casual dress and has pictures. And so you can get a better idea. Look, when you're in a company, look to the person who's in the position you would like to be in. And maybe your boss's boss's boss, right? It's the person who's in the position you would like to be in. That's the person you look to get an idea as to how you should dress once you're in a company. But for an interview, go with conservative, okay? You are not going to be wrong going with conservative. And as I said, put some money into it and invest in something that's high quality for all of those interviews. All right, let's talk about some other things that go into making a good impression when you go in for your interview. Texting, email. When you go in for an interview, your phone needs to be off and away. When I go in, when I'm driving somewhere, I leave my phone in the car. I don't want to run the risk just reminded me, thank you very much. Boy, am I really lucky, because that would have been really embarrassing. I don't want to run the risk that my phone's going to go off during the meeting. I mean, I hear, it seems to me, that seems almost like a duh, but I hear people who actually will answer the, excuse me, wait a minute, will answer a phone or a text message in the middle of an interview. I guarantee you that would do it, end of discussion, end of interview. That would be the end of it. So,
Forget it.
well,
Get
yes,
out.
exactly, no questions asked. So, you know, leave your phone in the car. You drove yourself there. Don't take it in with you. Don't worry about doing what I just did. It's forget to turn it off and find nobody call. Everybody runs the risk. Now, what would you do? What do you think you should do? Suppose you take it in like me. What would I have done if that had wrong?
Just apologize and turn it off.
Exactly. Apologize and turn it off. I am not going to look at it and see who it is that's calling me, because the message I send then is, ooh, let me see, maybe there's somebody that's more important than all of you with whom I am sitting here, and let me see if that person's trying to reach me. You never want to send that message. So no emailing, texting, no looking at the phone when you were there. Even when you are sitting in the reception area waiting for your interviewer to come get you, don't have your phone out and be working on it. You know, if you want to look at some information about the company, you know, look what they've got around the office, do that. But stay away from the phone. Focus on the interview.
You also want to vibrate media, that's like my first media.
Yeah.
Like that's when everybody decided to call me, so the phone was like really nonstop.
And they, you know they heard
Yeah,
it
you
too.
can-
I've even done that where I had my phone in my briefcase and put away when I'm doing the program, and it happened to be sitting next to something that echoed the vibration. And so I'm in like a room and it's like making all this noise up front, and there was like nothing I could do about it. So, as I said, if you have a choice, leave it. I strongly suggest, ladies, we didn't talk about purses. You know, you can be dressed in the most impeccably beautiful, conservative, business-like outfit, but if you're carrying the nylon backpack or a purse that is in really bad shape, it is going to reflect poorly overall. I usually suggest, ladies, that when you go for an interview, you do not take a purse with you. That whatever you need to have some sort of a nice agenda. You could maybe have a small, like a thing that you can just carry as opposed to a little teeny one fine that you have over your shoulder. It's one less thing to worry about when you're shaking hands and interacting with other people. So have something where you can put your phone, if it can't be left in the car, or your keys, ID, whatever else you need, have that with you, but don't have yet one more thing to carry. All of you should have some sort of a nice looking agenda for when you go in for an interview. You want to take information with you. I said you need to do the research. You need to go onto the company's website. And that, remember I said, if I said to somebody, do you have any questions for me? And they said no, it would be like, big X, not hiring them. So it's not a memory contest when you go in for an interview. It is, have you done the research? Do you know about this job? Do you know about this company? Why do you think you're a good fit for this company? And you can have a lot of that information with you. So have some sort of a nice quality notebook, agenda with you that's in good shape, because that's also one of those things that you will be judged by. Don't pull out a big pen with the top chewed off of it. And, you know, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Those are really typical questions, and they are really hard to answer if you haven't thought about it. You've spent most of your life being told not to brag about yourself. Well, when you go for an interview, that's exactly what you need to be doing. So if you aren't sure what your strengths and weaknesses are, talk to somebody that knows you really well. Ask for some suggestions as to what would be good ideas. Your research on the company. When you are asking questions about the company, you want to ask questions that cannot be answered on the website. So it might be, where do you see this company 5 years down the road? What do you see as your next major market? What do you see as your next big product? Those kinds of things that you can't answer. It's okay to have that information written down in your notebook so that you ask those questions. And oftentimes when you go in for an interview, there will be multiple interviews in that day. We always used to do that. Everybody had 3 interviews and a lunch. It's perfectly fine to ask the same questions to each of the people. You don't have to get creative and come up with different questions. Although if they're in different areas of the company and you know that ahead of time, it's okay to have different questions as well. They're not required. When you are communicating by email, beforehand, setting up interviews, that sort of thing, do we judge people by the quality of the emails they send out? What do you think? You get an email and it's full of typographical errors, spelling errors. What's your impression of the person? Bright, not so bright, not so positive, right? Okay? So you need to think about the fact that before they've had the opportunity to meet you, to talk to you, they're already forming opinions about you. As Maggie said, it would be a lovely world if we all got to, sitting in a room before they started making assumptions about you. But the reality is, there are going to be a lot of tools. Dress is going to be one of them. Your resume is going to be one of them. The emails that you use to communicate is going to be another way. So if your emails look like anything other than a formal letter, you could be negatively impacted by the email. When you're sending an email to friends, that sort of thing, it's perfectly fine to have them be informal and to use, acronyms and whatever. But when you are emailing with an adult whom you maybe not met about a job, that email needs to look like a letter. It needs to have a subject line, okay? When I get an email with no subject line, 90% of the time I simply delete it. I just assume that it's spam. It needs to have the person's name in the first line. So it might be Dear Mary, or it might be I am looking forward to meeting you, Mary, during the coming interview. Okay? So the person's name in the first line. You then have the body of the email, which needs to be in full sentences, grammatically correct. Is spell check always reliable? No. I write form instead of from 99.9% of the time. I have to read and reread to pick it up. So you cannot trust spell check. It needs to be full sentences. Okay? If you don't trust yourself to be detail oriented, have somebody else read it, because again, it could be the difference between you getting a job opportunity or not getting a job opportunity. And then for a closing, you might have sincerely, regards, warm regards, something like that, and then your name. Okay? And it should be your full name. How do you know what to call somebody that you've never met that you are potentially going to have an interview with? Okay, well, I'm saying if you are interacting with somebody, you're going to have an interview, and you know the person's name is Carol Haislip. What are you going to call them? Okay, Miss what? Okay, so it's going to be honorific and last name. I have a question for you. Okay? Okay, what does this honorific tell you? Okay, it's a man. That's all it tells you. What does this honorific tell you? Married woman. This honorific? And this honorific? Either. All right. Back in the 60s, a group of women got together and they said, you know what? It's not fair that men's honorific is tied to age, because if you are 12 or younger, that's the honorific for a boy. If you are, women's honorific is tied to their marital status. We are the only culture that has an honorific. These are all honorifics, which are tied to a marital status. So they invented this honorific. Okay, Ms. For a while it was, oh, you're a feminist if you use it. You're not a feminist if you use it. It's perfectly fine to use it. Whether you know if somebody's married or not married, it doesn't matter. whether you are speaking to them in person or via an email or a letter. This is a perfectly fine honorific. Make sure you know what somebody's honorific is, okay? If the person's a doctor, then you need to use that honorific when you speak to them. How do you know when it's all right to call somebody by his or her first name? How do you know? When they tell you. When they invite you. So this is one of those things, again, here on the side of leaving service, just like the clothing. Call the person by his or her last name and honorific until that person invites you to call them by their first name. In an email, if I sign my email with my first name, that's my invitation to you to call me by my first name. All right, so that works just as well as in person. But don't assume it's all right to call somebody by his or her first name until you've been invited to do so. Yes, Rachel.
Think about introducing people. Is it still the case, and this is applied to men and women, that you're not supposed to introduce women to men, or is that gone away now?
The rule for introductions, and I've never heard that rule, but this maybe this is going to clarify for you. The rule for introductions is when you're introducing two people to each other, there may be a person to whom you want to show respect. So if I was going to introduce, if Maggie was going to introduce Dr. Addie, Dr. Addie to me, she's the president of the school, so we would accord her more respect. So she would say her name first. So it would be Dr. Addie. I would like to introduce to you our instructor today, Carol Haislip. Carol, this is the president of the school, Dr. Addie, and you give me the first name too, if you don't remember. In social settings, so in business settings, the way we determine who deserves more respect is by title. In social settings, it is by age and gender. So you would introduce you would say the woman's name first, and you would introduce the man to her. It's as if you were presenting a gift to the person. That's how you make the decision. So I think that's probably where that's coming from. So, all right. You want to make sure you arrive on time. That's really important. Call the person by his or her name. Look attentive. As I said, I mentioned a couple of the questions. You know, why do you want to work here? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? You can go online and find lots of questions. Practice the questions. Don't assume that you'll get there all of a sudden have these wonderful answers in your head. Take some notes. Take them with you so that you can remember what it is you want to say when you get there. The bad news is, or I guess the good news is, that you have total control over the impression that other people have of you. The bad news is you have total control over the impression that other people have of you. There's a myriad of different things that go into this impression. But you have to decide what those words are going to be that pop into somebody's mind when they meet you. And then once you've decided what those words are, then you think about how you're going to represent both yourself and that company. I've got a handout here that goes a little bit more into some of the details. It's in very small print about interviewing. It's got my contact information on it. I am more than happy to answer questions. So if you think of some burning question after I leave here, feel free to shoot me an email. It's all on it. You go on to our, actually the email address, if I'm going to shoot me an email directly. Okay, great. Thank you all very much. I wish you luck. Thank you.